Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today we're going to be talking about the Henry Mckenna 10-year. Now this is kind of a rarity if you think about it. A 10-year bourbon, anything keeping that kind of an age statement nowadays is getting more and more rare. Now, when I talk about this whiskey, I have to acknowledge the fact that it is hard to find. And in my area, it commonly goes between $50 to $70. I bought this for about $60, and it hurt a little bit because I know that the MSRP on this is $30. So I'm curious, in your area, is this readily available? If so, what kind of prices are we looking at? I'd very much be curious about anybody who's like in the center of the country. Like I'm out here in Massachusetts, so things have to travel a bit. There's a little bit of price built into that, but I'm just wondering what you guys buy it for. So while you're writing that, let me tell you a little bit about the history of this particular bottle, because it's got a little bit of a history to it. So in the early 1800s, around 1835, this guy, Henry Mckenna, he immigrated from Ireland and came down to Fairfield, Kentucky, and he decided to start a distillery. He lived there for about 20 years before actually becoming a distiller, probably learning the craft or whatever. And then in the mid-50s, he started up the Henry Mckenna distillery. And he made this, and he started using charcoal to filter the whiskey. Now, this is a very similar process to the Lincoln County process, except not quite through as much charcoal. When you're talking Jack Daniels, they're putting it through 10 feet of charcoal. That's not quite what he was doing, but he was onto something, and he thought that running it through charcoal was removing impurities and improving the taste, and it does. So kind of man before his time, right? So in 1888, a guy that you might be familiar with, Julian Van Winkle. I'm not sure if you've ever heard the name Pappy Van Winkle before, but yes, Pappy Van Winkle ended up buying the distillery from Henry Mckenna, and he ran things the exact same way, kept everything the same, worked on the fact that this had a good brand name to it, and just kept everything the same. And that was a good call because, frankly, it is pretty good. But in 1990s, we're shooting ahead almost over 100 years. In the 1990s, this was purchased by Heaven Hill. And it kind of makes a lot of sense because the mash bill is very similar to a lot of other whiskeys that Heaven Hill has. 78% corn, 12% malted barley, 10% rye. When we talk about this whiskey, as I mentioned, it's 10 years old, it's 100 proof, it's got the mash bill I just mentioned, its MSRP is about $30, and there's not much more to say about it. So let's just go ahead and get into the nosing and the tasting. All right, let's go ahead and give it a nose. All right. So this one should not be a surprise. I'm gonna play along at home, right? When we're talking about a bourbon, what kind of flavors do we smell, right? I'm serious. Say it out loud or say it in your head, whatever. I want to know, what do you classify as a bourbon when you smell it, right? Obviously oak, right? But it's not the first nose we're getting. I just figure that we'll be on the same wavelength here. All right, first thing that you're really smelling though is vanilla. Then you've got oak. Then you have cinnamon and a little bit of honey, all of which combined makes for a smooth smell with a little bit of sweetness and a hint of what you're about to drink. The cinnamon to me is the only thing that comes out as even a hint of sharpness, and to me, the 100 proof is hidden very well in the smell here. It's not acrid. It doesn't just hit you with the 100 proof. Some people may say so. It depends. This is my taste, my nose. I don't get overwhelmed by the alcohol you hear, but you do smell it. All right, let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. So the alcohol is just a slight bit more prominent on the flavor, but here are some of the things that you're going to be getting. Let's start off with generics, right? I kind of like to break things down. I think of flavors in terms of layers. So I don't always immediately go down to, this tastes like vanilla. Sometimes I'm just like, what is it? Is it good? Is it bad? It's good. What do I get? It's sweet and it's smooth. Sure. Super easy. Let's go into that smooth bit because that one's the less complicated. What makes things smooth? Well, typically age or multi-barrels. So age typically goes with the barrel flavor too. So if you have something with a lot of age, like 10 years, you're going to be getting some oak as well. And clearly we do. I could have told you that just by looking at the bottle without ever tasting it, that this would taste like oak. It's a bourbon in 10 years in a barrel, right? It's oaky. So oak. Now the smoothness over here, that also comes from your age. So cool. When you look at the color, you can tell that this has spent a lot of time in an oak barrel. Sorry to go into so much detail, but I like to try to explain how I come up with some of this stuff. I hear a lot of people that they're like, you know, how do you taste whatever? I want some help tasting. And I find that breaking it down the way I'm thinking about this might help you guys. So let's go into the rest of it. Now we've got the sweetness. Now what typically gives sweetness here? Well, corn typically gives sweetness. And when you have corn, you're typically going to, I'm saying the word typical a lot, I'm sorry. You're going to be getting a lot of vanilla here. That's coming from the barrel, but it's also being lent from the corn interacting with the barrel. You're going to get these vanillins is what they're actually called, and they taste like vanilla, big shock. So you've got vanillins coming from the barrel. So you get vanilla, you've got cinnamon, that's coming from kind of the toasted barrel part. And then you've also got a bit of a honey flavor. That's just a general whiskey flavor mixing with the barrel, etc. And then caramel. Now caramel happens also from the toasting of the barrel. There are these sugars that are being literally caramelized inside of the barrel that are making their way into the whiskey. So to break that down again, we've got it's smooth, it's sweet, it's vanilla, caramel, honey, and as I mentioned, oak. Cool. All of that to say it tastes like bourbon, right? Bourbon tastes like bourbon for a reason, and it's people like Henry Mckenna who kind of, I don't want to say started because they didn't start it, but they helped to define the genre. They helped to define the style, and this tastes quintessentially bourbon. All right, as far as what do I rate it? When I taste this, everything about this is fine and wonderful. It's not mind-blowing, it's not stellar. It's just a good solid bourbon. And at 100 proof, you can mix this, you could drink it straight, you could do kind of whatever you want to this, and it will hold up or be hidden depending on how you're kind of mixing it. And just everything about it's kind of awesome, except for the price. And even a 10-year-old bourbon should be about $50 in my mind. So at $50, I don't hate this whatsoever. At $70, I think that's obscene, personally. And so if you're paying $70, people are just jacking up the price. Find it somewhere else. But if you can get this for $50 or less, I think this is a solid buy it. Honestly, if you get a good enough price, I'm actually going to change my rating. I think you should stock this whiskey. If you can find this for a good price, this is going to get that coveted stock it from me. I think I've only given out maybe 10 of them ever. So go ahead and buy this with confidence. Even if you have to spend a little bit more money, it's totally going to be something that you enjoy. However, if you don't want to spend that kind of money, here's another suggestion for you. There's actually two. If you were to get Elijah Craig barrel proof and proof it down just a little bit with some water, you're going to be in the same rough ballpark with actually probably more flavor. So that is another option, and that's usually about $50 to $55. Another option for way cheaper, and this is a little bit of a secret, Evan Williams Bottled in Bond. We're looking $20 to $25, $30 max, and you're going to be getting a lot of the same flavors, characteristics, and just general like experience that you're getting with this whiskey. So both of those are really good options and something that you should look into if you've never tried them. Anyway, so like I said, stock it. This is going to be great. Check out my other website, Whiskey Dick Picks. I know that came out of nowhere, but I have some single barrels that I've put out there, and I would love you guys to check them out and see what you think. Anyway, other than that, thank you guys for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.